Steelhead Reunion. And that's the last time I ever saw her, Sam Steelhead punchlined his story and made his brother Steve laugh so hard that air came out of his gills. I would say that the two brothers were getting caught up with each other's lives, but Salmon never used the word caught. So let's just say they were filling each other in. It seemed like there were always two or three out of the 50 to 100 siblings in every Salmon family that became best friends, and that was Sam and Steve. Of course, they only saw each other once a year when it was time to head back to the old neighborhood and have a few dozen more kids. After all, it's not like salmon have cell phones or anything, although some do dink around with email, but it takes forever when you can only use one fin. Sam couldn't help but notice that Steve's easy laughter wasn't entirely based on a few funny stories. His brother just seemed like he was swimming in a mix of energy drinks and joy juice. "What's going on with you anyway?" Sam couldn't help but ask. "Since when do you swim around grinning gill to gill like you don't have a care in the world?" Steve laughed again and asked his brother, "Do you remember how good it felt when Dad would take us out jumping? He'd find some brook barely deep enough to breathe in, and we'd practice our jumping, first just hopping over underwater stones, then over rocks that just poked above the surface, till we got strong enough for our first little waterfall." "Oh, yeah, that was so much fun," his brother reminisced with him. "It felt like such a rush when we flexed our way up those tiny little streams. And then he took us to the mountain. It looked totally impossible," Steve took over again. "But he showed us how to launch just right to get to the next flat spot and swim there until we felt strong enough to jump for the next one." "We fell back so many times," Sam laughed. "That's right," Steve agreed. "And remember the feeling of being suspended in air? One way working harder than ever, but in another a weird stillness, like time just stopped?" "Oh, I loved that feeling," Sam celebrated with him. "It was like 1 minute we're as discouraged and exhausted as we could get, and then we were in the air, and the sun would shine, and we could see that next landing, and Dad was cheering us on, shouting that we could make it. We had hope. Our next jump had nothing to do with what we thought we could do, but everything to do with what he thought we could do." Steve caught his breath. "Yeah, I thought I was going to die for sure, but he always seemed to know that I wouldn't. Like he could see a lot more than I could," Sam remembered thoughtfully. "I have noticed how hard it was to hang on to that hope," he continued. "Dark water, gray skies, hundreds of kids. I can definitely remember the exhaustion, but the hope, not so much," Sam trailed off. "Well, I may have found a way to tap back into that," his brother remarked, trying to sound casual. "Tap into what? The hope?" Sam asked. "Well, don't just swim there. Spill it." "What if I told you that hope was available all the time, full time?" Steve began, as if about to tell a secret. "I'd tell you that I'll personally hook you in your sleep if you don't tell me," Sam shot back, only partially joking. Steve smiled and went on. "I understand how weird this is all going to sound, so I can better show you. Come back with me next week and you can see where it all happened." Well, the reunion was in full swing, and Sam casually agreed so he could get back to the party, never giving it another thought. But when the party week ended and families had properly been expanded, Steve came back around and swam in excited circles. He was ready for a trip down the coast with his bro. Sam had forgotten, and it was hard to remember why he was even so interested. But he had to admit that his schedule was open, so they headed south together. As they began their long trek, Steve started his saga. Do you remember the biggest part of that hopeful feeling, besides Dad cheering us on? He began. Definitely the sunshine, was Sam's quick response. Of course, the sun wasn't shining every time we jumped, but when it was, wow. What if I told you that the sun is always shining? It just never stops. We can't see it because of the clouds, Steve said with a now trademark grin. What are you talking about? Sam retorted. Even if that's true, how would you know? He shot back. Did you figure out how to Google and somehow learn how to read? No, his brother chuckled back. But you're close. The truth is, I did find an old book off the coast in Monterey Bay. It was in this boat at the bottom of the bay. Big deal, I thought to myself. Like you said, it's not like I can read. But for some reason, I swam around it for a minute or two and got this crazy thought of tasting one of the pages. I know, right? He sidelined with a flare. I eat a lot of stuff, but not paper. But the thought just wouldn't go away. So I started to think of it as like a seaweed salad or something. And I flipped it open and took a nibble. Steve could tell that this was where the story was about to get interesting. Anyway, the strangest things started to happen. I felt lighter somehow. I kind of effortlessly rose to the surface and started to jump just a little. Not waterfall jumping, just playful kind of wave jumping. I seriously felt about 10 pounds lighter. So I dove back down for another nibble. And that time when I hit the surface, I actually flew a few feet, he blurted, while swimming in graceful circles as he relived the moment. Wait a minute, Sam burst in. What do you mean you flew? Like a really long jump? Or like what a salmon could never do? 'Cause if that's what you're talking about, you're flying your way right into a straitjacket. Steve sobered up for a minute and continued. I know it's hard to believe, and the story actually gets a little weirder. I was totally freaked out by the flight. Even though it was so effortless, it messed with my salmon sense big time. So I thought maybe I'm daydreaming or something, and I went home to settle down. But the next day, I found the book again and snacked on another page. It really seemed weird, but it did taste kind of sweet. And this time, when I floated to the surface, I just flat took off. I went high, I went low, I zigged right, I zagged left. I flapped my flippers for fun, but I didn't need them to keep flying. Within just a few days, I was soaring above those clouds. It was amazing. Bright, full sunshine. Everything looked so beautiful. Even the tops of those ugly gray clouds were as white as cotton. And up there, I didn't have a care in the world, Steve said in full reliving it mode. What was it about this book? Was it the paper, the ink, the words? What was it about taking this stuff in that changed everything? Sam was genuinely scared about what was happening with his favorite brother. Steve, salmon can't fly. We have had some pretty good jumps, but not flying. I know, his brother agreed. But here we are in Monterey, and there's the boat. He pointed his fin excitedly. Sure enough, they found it right where Steve described, and Sam had to admit that when he first saw the book, he did feel kind of a strange little urge to taste it. What's going on? Sam thought to himself. I'm the sane one here. Steve helped himself to a now familiar page and invited his brother to give it a try. Sam figured it couldn't hurt to show his brother that nothing would happen if he took a nibble, so he did. But the strangest thing did start to happen. Sam began to feel lighter. He fin-slapped himself to wake up from an obvious dream, but he didn't wake up. Instead, he kept floating toward the surface and watched wide-eyed as his brother actually took off and flew. Well, with all his brother had already told him, Sam didn't need a further invitation. He jumped right out of the water and sailed about 20 feet. Then he headed straight back to the book for another bite. And this time, when he broke the surface, he actually flew in graceful wide arcs with his brother. For the next several days, the brothers delighted in defying gravity, full of the hope that they had as minnows, venturing high above the clouds, giving each other high fins and waving their tails at some very confused geese. They marveled at views of dry land that they'd only ever heard of in stories. What's happening? They laughed and shouted to each other. How can we even breathe up here? After a crazy and miraculous week, Steve and Sam agreed that the pages of this book were too good to keep to themselves. They thought of all their families and friends swimming around in deep water world, trapped under dark gray clouds, never knowing that the sun was shining like crazy the whole time, trying to give them hope. So with a new sense of purpose, the brothers foraged the flotsam in the boat, and hoping to find more copies of the book that changed their lives, they were delighted to find cabinets full of them. Now they just had to find places where they could take these books and invite everybody they knew to soar and see the sunshine. But they did have a little problem. As middle-aged dads, they knew how important it was for them and their kids especially to jump waterfalls to grow strong. So some challenges in their lives were actually healthy. And now they had this gift that could eliminate the need to swim up any more rocky streams or waterfalls, healthy or not. They could just fly over them all. So they made each other a promise that this would never be used to avoid any healthy struggle. They knew that this was a gift to give hope in every challenge, not to replace every challenge. So they parted with a combination of sunny hope when a challenge made them stronger, and flight when a battle just wasn't healthy. And that gave them all they needed to jump mountains, let alone just a waterfall.